The galaxy had never seen a punishment like this. The Council of Ancient Alien Races, in all their wisdom and power, had sentenced humanity to a death world, an inhospitable planet where no life could possibly survive. It was a place of constant storms, wild terrain, and monstrous creatures that hunted anything foolish enough to land. The humans, unaware of the Council's decision, were transported to the planet, one by one. No explanation was given. There were no warnings or pleas for mercy. The aliens, cold and calculating, watched from the safety of their ships orbiting high above. They saw the humans as nothing more than a fleeting curiosity, a species too dangerous to be allowed to thrive in the galaxy. They believed that the harsh environment would end the human threat once and for all. But as the humans' feet hit the barren ground, something unexpected happened. The planet was alive with danger. Thick clouds churned overhead, casting a permanent shadow over the land. The air itself felt toxic, heavy with chemicals that burned the lungs. Sharp rocks jutted out from the ground, and the very earth trembled beneath their feet. Massive creatures lurked in the shadows, beasts with eyes like burning coals and teeth as sharp as blades. The humans were alone, surrounded by nothing but the terrifying unknown. They had nothing. No weapons. No food. No hope. Yet, in the face of certain death, a spark of defiance ignited in the hearts of the humans. They weren't like the aliens had thought. They weren't meek or easily broken. The instinct to survive was stronger than anything the aliens had anticipated. It had always been the driving force behind humanity's rise, this relentless, undeniable will to endure. The first few hours were chaos. People stumbled and fell, some succumbing to the harsh elements, others to the strange creatures that roamed the land. The terror was overwhelming, but as the hours stretched into days, something changed. The humans, struggling to breathe in the toxic air, started to adapt. Those who had experience in survival tactics, veterans, hunters, explorers, took charge. They began forming small groups, pooling what little resources they had. They built makeshift shelters from the jagged rocks, scavenged the land for anything they could eat, and started learning the patterns of the monstrous creatures that roamed the planet. Everywhere they looked, there were signs of struggle. The alien forces had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. They had thought humanity would fall apart under the pressure. They had no idea what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. This death world was meant to break them. But instead, it was forging them into something new, something stronger, more resilient. In the midst of this, one man stood apart from the others. He had seen this before, a long time ago. Years of military service, years spent in harsh conditions, had taught him that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about strategy, intelligence, and unity. His name was Cain. He had led teams in the past, and though he had never faced anything quite like this, he knew one thing for sure: if they wanted to survive, they needed to band together. Cain knew that this death world was only the beginning of their nightmare. The Alien Council thought they had sealed their fate, but they had underestimated the humans' resourcefulness. The odds were against them, but one thing was clear: the aliens would learn, all too soon, that the humans they'd banished were not going to die so easily. As he looked out over the barren landscape, his eyes narrowed with determination. They had been cast aside, abandoned. But what the aliens didn't know was that humans didn't need saving. They were survivors. And they would fight for their place in the galaxy, no matter the cost. The winds howled, and the first of the alien creatures appeared on the horizon. A massive, four-legged beast with claws that could shred metal. It sniffed the air, sensing the humans' presence. Cain tightened his grip on a jagged rock he had sharpened into a crude weapon. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for now. Behind him, a group of survivors gathered, some trembling with fear, others standing firm, ready to fight. They had no choice. This was their new reality. They were stuck on a world that wanted them dead. And they would not go quietly. The nightmare had only just begun. The days that followed were filled with both fear and resolve. The group of humans, led by Cain, had barely begun to understand the full scope of the deadly planet they had been banished to. As they huddled together in their makeshift shelter, the harsh winds howled outside, shaking the brittle rocks that held their fragile walls together. They could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on them, but they also felt something else: determination. Cain stood outside, his eyes scanning the horizon, his mind racing through strategies for survival. The planet was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The air itself was thick and unbreathable, the sky perpetually darkened by clouds of swirling toxins. Strange, jagged mountains rose from the barren ground, casting eerie shadows over the land. And lurking in the distance, the massive predators, beasts with glowing eyes and claws that could tear through steel, patrolled the desolate terrain. The survivors had learned quickly that they were not just dealing with a hostile environment, they were facing a planet designed to kill them. But despite all the odds, they hadn't given up. Not yet. Inside the shelter, a small fire crackled, its light flickering in the dark. A handful of survivors were gathered around, trying to rest, trying to make sense of their predicament. Cain joined them, taking a seat beside an older man named Roran, whose face was lined with age and worry. "We need to find food," Cain said, his voice low but firm. "We can't rely on this fire for warmth forever. And we can't stay hidden from those creatures forever either." Roran nodded, but his eyes were filled with doubt. "Where do we even begin? The entire planet's trying to kill us. The storms, the beasts. I've never seen anything like it." "I know," Cain replied, his voice steady. "But we've been through worse. We just need to think. Plan. And we need to stick together." The group was silent for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. Everyone had known the planet would be dangerous, but the reality was much harsher than any of them had imagined. They had underestimated the scale of the planet's hostility. Even the air felt alive with danger, and every shadow seemed to hide something waiting to pounce. At that moment, a young woman named Mila, who had been pacing nervously by the entrance, spoke up. "What if we try to learn about the planet? What if there's a way to use its own dangers against the creatures?" Cain looked up at her, intrigued. Mila was sharp, quick-witted, and had a background in biology. Her suggestion wasn't entirely out of the question. Perhaps there was something they could use, something the planet's creatures feared, or something that could turn the environment to their advantage. "We'll need to study it," Cain said, considering her words carefully. "We need to find a way to get close to the creatures, observe them, and learn their behavior. If we're going to survive, we need every advantage we can get." Roran grunted in agreement, though he still seemed doubtful. "And what about food? How long do we survive before we're all starving out here?" Cain sighed. "We can't afford to wait too long. There has to be something on this planet we can use. Maybe there are plants or other creatures that we can hunt. We just need to look harder." As the hours passed, Cain and the others began to devise a plan. They decided to split into smaller groups, each tasked with different objectives. One group would search for food, another would study the alien creatures, and the third would focus on fortifying their shelter against the constant storms. Mila, eager to put her knowledge to use, volunteered to lead the team studying the creatures. She had seen strange markings on the rocks near the edge of their camp, signs that suggested these creatures weren't just mindless predators, they had a pattern, a way of moving, a way of hunting that could be understood and anticipated. "We'll figure this out," Mila said with determination as she gathered her supplies. "We have to. It's our only shot." As the teams set off into the harsh wilderness, the weight of the situation hung heavy on their shoulders. They had been banished here, left to die in the most brutal environment imaginable. The aliens who had condemned them to this fate believed they would break, that they would fail. But with each passing moment, the humans refused to bow to the planet's cruelty. Kayan watched as his team disappeared into the landscape, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. He knew the planet would test them in ways they could never have prepared for, but he also knew one thing: the humans were far from defeated. They were resourceful. They were strong. And together, they would find a way to survive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group's shelter grew quieter. The storm had begun to intensify, the winds howling louder as night settled in. Kayan stood outside for a moment, watching the distant shapes of the predators moving across the land, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness. This planet was supposed to be their tomb, but Kayan refused to let it be their end. They had been cast aside, but they were still here. And as long as they had breath, they would fight. The humans had no idea what the future held, but they knew one thing: they would survive. They had to. And with each day, they would prove the aliens wrong. The winds howled across the barren landscape, pushing against the survivors as they ventured further into the heart of the planet. Kayan's group had already established a fragile sense of order, each person taking on specific tasks, yet the challenges of the world around them felt like an insurmountable wall that refused to crumble. The air was still toxic, and the terrain was unforgiving, but today was the day they would venture into the wilderness and learn more about the creatures that roamed the land. Mila had convinced Kayan to allow her group to study the creatures up close. She believed that understanding the behavior of these monsters would be their best chance of survival. She wasn't just looking for patterns in their movements, she wanted to understand why they hunted, what they feared, and how they could be used to their advantage. They'd come across strange markings near their shelter. Deep scratches in the earth, symbols carved into the stone that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. It didn't take much for Mila to draw a connection. These creatures weren't simply predators, they were territorial, and they communicated in ways that humans couldn't yet comprehend. With caution in their every step, Mila and her group moved further from the shelter. The landscape shifted from jagged rock formations to vast plains of withered vegetation. The air was thick with humidity, the oppressive heat radiating off the ground in waves. Despite the danger, there was a strange sense of quiet among the group as they proceeded through the alien wilderness. Kayan stayed behind, keeping an eye on the shelter while the rest of the group explored. His thoughts were filled with worry, but there was little he could do except wait and trust that Mila's instincts would lead her to some crucial discovery. It wasn't long before they came across something that made their hearts stop. At first, it was just a faint sound, a low, rumbling growl, like the distant thunder before a storm. But as they rounded a corner, they saw it. The creature was immense, its body sleek and muscular, covered in scales that shimmered in the dim light. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, and its long, twisted limbs ended in claws that scraped the ground as it moved. The creature was feeding on something, a pile of carcasses, fresh and bloody. Its snout was buried deep in the remains, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood. But as it fed, it noticed them. Its head snapped up, and its eyes locked onto Mila's group. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The creature studied them, its eyes narrowing as if calculating its next move. It was unnervingly intelligent, almost as if it was toying with them. Mila's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Stay still," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't move. Don't provoke it." Her group froze, barely breathing, as the creature slowly stepped toward them. The ground vibrated under its weight, each step sending shockwaves through the air. Mila's hands trembled, but she kept her focus on the creature's movements, analyzing every twitch, every shift of its body. Then, without warning, the creature lunged. It moved with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air. Mila barely had time to react before one of her companions, Jorn, shouted a warning. The group scattered, but not quickly enough. One of the creature's claws raked across the arm of a man named Tarek, sending him crashing to the ground with a scream of pain. Mila's instincts kicked in. Get him out of here. Now, she ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. The group scrambled to help Tarek, pulling him away from the creature's range. But it was clear they were no match for the beast. Their only hope was to retreat. Kane's voice crackled through their communication devices. What's happening? Report. Mila gritted her teeth, trying to control her fear. We've made contact. The creature is hostile. We need to fall back. But before they could make their escape, the creature let out a deafening roar. The ground shook as it charged toward them, its teeth bared and its claws extended like deadly daggers. Mila acted fast, pulling out a flare from her bag. She lit it and tossed it into the air, hoping to create a distraction. The flare blazed bright, filling the sky with a sudden burst of light. The creature hesitated for a moment, distracted by the unexpected flash. That moment was all they needed. Mila and her group bolted, dragging Tarek behind them, as the creature hesitated, giving them just enough time to put distance between themselves and the predator. They ran for what felt like miles, the sound of the creature's roar echoing in their ears as they desperately scrambled toward their shelter. Tarek's wounds were severe, but they had no choice but to press on. His cries for help spurred them onward, the adrenaline coursing through their veins as they raced against time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stumbled back into the safety of the shelter. Everyone was breathing heavily, their bodies shaking with the aftermath of the close encounter. Tarek was carried inside, where the others immediately began tending to his injuries. Kane greeted them with a look of concern as he saw Tarek's condition. What happened? Mila's face was pale, but her voice remained steady. The creature, it's more than just a predator. It's intelligent. It hunted us, but it didn't kill right away. It studied us first. We barely got away. Kane frowned, his mind racing. This changes everything. They're not just animals, they're part of the ecosystem here. And we're going to need to understand how they think if we're going to survive. The group sat in tense silence, processing the new reality they faced. The planet wasn't just dangerous because of its terrain or weather, it was alive, in ways they hadn't even begun to understand. And now, they had to outthink it, outlast it, and outsmart the deadly creatures that called it home. They had barely escaped death, but they were no closer to understanding how to conquer this world. One thing was clear, survival would require more than just strength. It would take cunning, patience, and, most importantly, unity. If they couldn't work together, they wouldn't make it off this planet alive. And they all knew that the worst was yet to come. The shelter was quieter now, the silence heavy as the survivors tried to catch their breath. The adrenaline from the encounter with the alien creature still surged through their veins, but the danger had not passed. The creature's intelligence was a chilling revelation, one that added a new layer of urgency to their survival. Now, they knew they weren't just facing wild beasts. They were dealing with a planet full of cunning, territorial creatures that would stop at nothing to protect their domain. Kane's mind was sharp, his thoughts focused on what they could do next. The group had managed to avoid further attacks by staying hidden and cautious, but this was not a long-term solution. Sooner or later, they would have to venture out again, to search for food, for water, for resources, and to continue their study of the planet's dangers. Mila's report from the earlier encounter had unsettled everyone. The creature they had faced was not just an animal, it was a predator that understood them, that watched and waited before it struck. Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this planet. It wasn't just hostile, it seemed deliberate, as if it had been designed to test them, to see if they had the resilience to survive. Keep your guard up, Kane said, his voice calm but firm as the group gathered to discuss their next steps. The creatures here are unlike anything we've ever encountered. We'll have to change our approach. We'll need to be smarter. The group nodded in agreement, but the question of how to move forward remained unanswered. They had barely escaped with their lives, and now they had to figure out how to thrive in a place that seemed determined to destroy them. That night, as the storm raged outside, Mila couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the creature they had seen, its eyes, its movements, the way it had studied them like an experiment. It wasn't just hunger driving it. It had been testing them, learning. And Mila couldn't shake the feeling that this planet had once been home to something more advanced. Something that had shaped the creatures, shaped the environment. But who or what could have done that? Driven by this nagging thought, Mila decided to investigate. She knew there were ruins on the far side of the planet, remnants of a long-forgotten civilization. She hadn't yet told the others, but she had a theory. What if these creatures weren't the only inhabitants of the planet? What if there was something, or someone, behind it all? A force that had been controlling the ecosystem, crafting it into a deadly trap for the humans. The next morning, she shared her suspicions with Cain, who listened carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. You think the creatures are part of some larger design? Something or someone is controlling them? Mila nodded. I don't know for sure, but I think there's something in those ruins that might explain all of this. If we can find out what's been happening here, we might be able to turn the planet's dangers to our advantage. Cain considered this for a moment. It's risky. But if there's any chance of learning how to survive, we have to take it. He gathered the group, and they set out, determined to find the ruins Mila had spoken of. The journey was treacherous. Every step was a fight against the terrain, the poisonous air, and the looming threat of the predators. But as they approached the location, they noticed something strange. The air felt different, tinged with an eerie energy. The winds died down, and the landscape, though still harsh, seemed to shift, as though the land itself was guiding them toward something. Hours passed as they navigated through a dense thicket of alien flora, moving cautiously to avoid detection. The creatures that roamed the planet were relentless in their pursuit of prey, but they were nowhere in sight. It felt as though something was watching them, guiding them forward. Finally, they came to a clearing, and there it was. A structure unlike anything they had seen before. Massive stone pillars rose from the ground, twisted and cracked by the ages, but still standing firm. The ruins were ancient, but the technology embedded within them was unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. Mila's heart raced as she approached the ruins, running her hands along the smooth, glowing surface of a stone slab. It hummed with energy, as if it were alive. There were markings on the walls, symbols that were unfamiliar, but oddly familiar all the same. As she studied them, a cold chill ran down her spine. These symbols, they weren't just decoration. They were a warning. This was not built for us, Mila muttered, her voice trembling. This wasn't meant for humanity. Cain stepped forward, his eyes scanning the structure. He could feel the weight of its presence, the deep sense of history that permeated the air. What do you mean? Mila swallowed hard, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the markings. These creatures, they're not native to this planet. They were brought here. But by who? And for what purpose? The group stood in silence, the realization slowly dawning on them that the death world they had been cast into was no accident. The creatures, the deadly storms, the hostile environment, it was all part of a much larger plan. Someone had crafted this world, designed it to be a living, breathing weapon. And they had been chosen as its test subjects. As the gravity of their situation settled in, the survivors knew they had to act fast. If they were going to survive this planet, they had to learn more, much more. The truth was out there, hidden in the ancient ruins. But to uncover it, they would have to face even greater dangers. And the most shocking discovery of all? They weren't just being tested by the creatures of this world, they were being watched by an intelligence far greater than anything they could comprehend. The discovery of the ancient ruins had shifted something within the group. Mila's initial suspicions about the planet being part of a larger, deliberate design had been confirmed. It wasn't just a deadly world created by nature. It was a world engineered by an intelligence that was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. The true purpose of the creatures, the storms, the hostile environment, and even the strange energy that pulsed through the ruins remained a mystery, but one thing was certain: they were not here by accident. That night, as the survivors huddled together in their shelter, the weight of their discovery hung heavily over them. They had been thrown into this brutal environment with no explanation, no warning. The aliens who had banished them to this death world had believed that they would break, that they would die, nothing more than a simple test, a means of removing a perceived threat. But now, in the shadow of the ancient ruins, it felt as if the humans were no longer the victims of chance. They had stumbled onto something far bigger than they could have imagined. And yet, despite the dangers, a strange sense of hope began to take root in their hearts. "Maybe this is a chance for us," Cain said quietly, his voice thoughtful as he stared into the flickering flames of their campfire. "Maybe we weren't just sent here to die. Maybe there's something we can learn. Something we can use." The others gathered around him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Roran, the older man who had been with them since the beginning, spoke up. "We've learned a lot already. This place doesn't just want to kill us, it's testing us. It's trying to see if we're worthy of surviving." Mila nodded, her mind still reeling from the encounter with the ruins. "It's not just about surviving the creatures. The planet itself is part of this test. It's pushing us, challenging us to learn and adapt. And if we can understand how this world works, maybe we can turn the tables." The fire crackled, sending a shower of sparks into the air, but the group was quiet, deep in thought. For the first time since their banishment, they felt a sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting to understand, to uncover the mystery of the planet, and to prove that humanity's will to live could not be broken. The next day, Cain led a smaller group back to the ruins, this time with a clearer goal. They would investigate the structures more thoroughly, try to decipher the strange symbols and markings, and look for anything that could give them a better understanding of what had happened on this planet. It was risky, but they couldn't afford to wait any longer. Time was running out, and they needed answers. As they approached the ruins, the atmosphere felt different. The air seemed charged, filled with an electric tension that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. The ruins loomed before them, ancient and imposing, as if they were alive with secrets. It was as if the planet itself was watching them, waiting to see what they would do. Mila was the first to step forward, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the stone walls. The symbols seemed to shift under her touch, their meaning becoming clearer the longer she studied them. She could feel a strange resonance, a faint pulse of energy that seemed to come from deep within the structure. "This isn't just a monument," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's a map." Cain stepped closer, his eyes scanning the markings. "A map of what?" Mila's eyes widened as the realization hit her. "It's a map of the planet, and there's something beneath it. Something buried deep inside." The others gathered around, their curiosity piqued. They had come to the ruins looking for answers, but now it seemed like they were on the brink of discovering something even more incredible. If this map was to be believed, there was something hidden deep beneath the surface of the planet, something powerful, something that could hold the key to their survival. Without wasting any time, Cain ordered the group to prepare for an expedition. They would have to dig, excavate, and explore, but they had no choice. Whatever was hidden below the planet's surface could be their salvation, or their doom. As they began to dig, the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, as if the planet itself was reacting to their presence. The further they dug, the more the air grew thick with tension. The strange energy from the ruins seemed to grow stronger, pulsing with an urgency that made them all feel uneasy. They pressed on, determined to uncover whatever lay hidden beneath. Hours passed, and just as the group was beginning to feel the weight of exhaustion, their tool struck something solid. A low rumble echoed through the earth as the ground shifted, and a large stone slab rose from the earth, revealing a hidden passage leading deep underground. The group stood frozen for a moment, the air thick with anticipation. They had found it. The thing that had been buried for so long. The answers they had been searching for were within reach. Cain motioned for the group to move forward, and they descended into the darkness, their hearts racing. The passage was narrow, the walls lined with strange symbols that seemed to glow with an eerie light. It felt like they were walking into the heart of the planet itself. As they ventured deeper, they came across what appeared to be an ancient chamber, a vast room filled with strange technology, alien artifacts, and a large central structure that pulsed with a dark energy. It was clear that this chamber was not of natural origin. It had been built, designed, and maintained by something, or someone, far more advanced than the humans could ever have imagined. And there, in the center of the room, lay a strange device, an object that seemed to hum with power, its surface covered in the same symbols they had seen on the ruins above. It was clear now. This device, whatever it was the key to understanding the planet's purpose. It was the reason they had been brought here. Mila stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the device. The moment her fingers made contact, the chamber seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and a low, resonating sound filled the air, as if the planet itself was awakening. Cain's heart pounded in his chest. They had come here for answers. And now, it seemed, they were about to get them. But the question remained, what would they do with this newfound knowledge? Would they be able to use it to escape this deadly world, or would it prove to be their undoing? The answers they sought were finally within reach, but so were the consequences of disturbing the planet's dark secrets. The moment Mila's fingers made contact with the device, the entire room seemed to shudder, as if the planet itself had noticed their intrusion. The pulsing energy grew stronger, resonating through the stone walls, reverberating through the air. The survivors stood frozen in the chamber, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. They had unlocked something they weren't prepared for. The strange device at the center of the room began to hum, its surface lighting up with the same symbols they had seen etched on the ruins above. A low, mechanical whirring sound followed, as if the device was awakening after centuries of dormancy. The walls trembled, and a deep vibration filled the air, sending ripples through the stone beneath their feet. It was as if they had triggered something far beyond their understanding. Cain instinctively stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. Mila looked back at him, her face pale. "I didn't do anything, it just responded to my touch," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She was as unsettled as the others, but something within her, an unshakable curiosity, kept her grounded. She stepped closer to the device, almost compelled by its energy. The others hesitated, fear evident in their eyes, but they followed her lead, unsure of what to do next. As they gathered around the device, the walls of the chamber began to shift. The glowing symbols on the walls started to move, rearranging themselves into new patterns, as though they were being activated by an unseen force. The air grew thick with the weight of their discovery, and the survivors could feel the presence of something ancient, something far more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. Then, the ground beneath them trembled, and the sound of grinding stone echoed through the chamber. A hidden panel in the far corner of the room slid open, revealing a holographic projection that flickered to life before them. It was a map, a detailed map of the planet, but there was something else, something that made the blood run cold in their veins. The map wasn't just a geographic layout of the world, it was a timeline, a record of events that stretched back millennia. As the projection flickered, they saw images of the planet's past. It had once been a thriving world, rich with life and advanced technology, inhabited by a race far beyond anything the humans could comprehend. But then, something changed. The images shifted, showing the arrival of a foreign force, alien invaders who had come to conquer the planet. The invaders were ruthless, destroying everything in their path. The planet's once vibrant ecosystems were decimated, and its inhabitants were either killed or driven into hiding. Then, the images shifted again. A new species emerged, a species that had been trapped, exiled to this very planet. The survivors had been chosen. They had been brought here for a reason, but not to die as the aliens had hoped. No, this exile was a test. A test to prove that they were worthy of something far greater. The survivors watched, transfixed by the unfolding story, as the map displayed the timeline of their banishment. The aliens had not just cast them aside, they had feared humanity. They had known that if humanity was allowed to thrive, they would become a force to be reckoned with. The banishment to this death world was no mere punishment, it was a calculated move, a way to remove the greatest threat the galaxy had ever seen before it could fully emerge. As the holographic map flickered and died, the room fell into an unsettling silence. The survivors stood motionless, their minds racing with the implications of what they had just seen. They were not here by accident. The planet was not some random exile, it was a carefully constructed trap. And the creatures, the storms, the very atmosphere itself, were part of this test, designed to see if humanity could survive, adapt, and eventually conquer. We were never meant to die, Mila said softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and anger. We were sent here to be tested, to see if we could prove ourselves worthy of the galaxy. Kayan's eyes narrowed. He was still processing the revelations, but something in him had shifted. The humans had been wronged, abandoned by those who feared them. But now, he realized, they had something the aliens had not expected, the will to fight, to survive against impossible odds. We've been tested, he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. And we're still here. We're not just survivors. We're the ones who will rise from this, no matter what. The others gathered around him, their faces set with determination. This discovery had not broken them, it had emboldened them. They were no longer just victims of circumstance. They had a purpose now. They had been chosen, not to die, but to prove that they were stronger than the galaxy had ever believed. As they stood there in the chamber, the weight of their situation settling in, one thought dominated their minds: they had to find a way off this planet. They had to prove to the alien races that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy had underestimated them, cast them aside as weak, but they would soon learn the truth. Kayan turned to face the others. We've learned enough for now. It's time to take this fight to them. We're not just going to survive this planet. We're going to turn it against them. And when we're done, we'll show the galaxy that humanity is a force like no other. The survivors nodded in agreement, the fire of determination burning brightly in their eyes. They had been exiled to this death world, left to perish. But instead of fading into nothingness, they had uncovered the truth. And now, they would rise, stronger than ever. The aliens may have thought they had won. But they had only begun to witness what humanity was capable of. The survivors had found their strength, and the revelation of their true purpose had shifted their focus from mere survival to something much greater: rebellion. The alien races that had exiled them believed they were above humanity, that their power was unchallenged. But the humans, now armed with knowledge and determination, knew they could prove otherwise. With the ancient device's energy resonating through the planet's core, Kayan led his group toward a new plan, one that would change everything. They had learned that the planet's creators, the very aliens who had exiled them, had left something behind, a network of advanced technologies and defenses buried deep within the planet's surface. These were the tools that would allow the humans to stand against the very forces that had cast them aside. But the road ahead wasn't simple. They had to contend with the dangers of the planet, the creatures that still stalked them, and the ever-present storm. It would take everything they had: strength, intelligence, unity, to even begin to fathom the scale of what they were about to undertake. Cain knew that they couldn't do it alone. So, he began reaching out to other survivors across the planet, gathering anyone who could help. Word spread fast. The humans, once scattered and broken, now had a purpose. They were no longer afraid of the planet's brutal landscape. They had learned to adapt, to use the world's own dangers to their advantage. The creatures that once terrorized them were now part of their strategy, as they learned to avoid, outsmart, and even turn them into tools for survival. It wasn't just about learning the planet's secrets anymore, it was about taking back control. The survivors had found something they had never realized they possessed, a unity that made them stronger than any force they had faced. Days turned into weeks, and the group grew. They built weapons from the planet's strange materials, harvested the energy from the ancient device, and began setting up traps to defend themselves against the alien creatures. They studied the alien technology further, finding ways to re-engineer it for their own use. The ancient civilization that had once inhabited the planet had left behind more than just ruins. They had left the blueprint for something far more dangerous. Cain stood atop a high cliff, gazing out over the horizon. The planet's storm still raged, but for the first time since their arrival, he didn't feel the weight of despair. He had seen the strength of his people, seen the way they had come together, and he knew that they were capable of more than anyone had ever thought. The humans weren't the weak, helpless creatures the alien races believed them to be. They were adaptable, resilient, and relentless. But as the survivors began to organize, another threat emerged, one that hadn't been considered. The aliens, once watching from afar, now realized that the humans weren't dying. They were thriving. And that was something the aliens couldn't tolerate. An alien ship appeared in the sky, massive and imposing. It hovered above the planet, casting a shadow over the land below. It was a warship, a sign that the aliens had come to finish what they had started. Cain's heart raced as he watched the ship descend toward the surface. This was the moment they would face their greatest challenge yet. But as the ship descended, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the ancient device activated once more. A surge of energy shot through the atmosphere, and the alien ship faltered, its systems failing. The humans had learned how to use the planet's energy against their oppressors. It was a fight they had been preparing for, and now it was time to face it. The survivors didn't hesitate. They had come this far, and they weren't about to back down. Cain led the charge, his group moving with determination as they set out to confront the alien forces. They had already proven they could survive, they had already shown the aliens that they couldn't be defeated. Now, they would show them that they would no longer be oppressed. As they approached the alien warship, the world seemed to hold its breath. The survivors were ready. The planet was alive with energy, and the humans had learned how to use it. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about taking control of their destiny. When they reached the warship, the aliens, once confident in their superiority, realized they were facing a force they hadn't accounted for. The humans were no longer the fragile, exiled species they had thought them to be. They were a force to be reckoned with. And now, the humans would make their stand. The battle was fierce, the stakes higher than ever. But as the humans fought, something extraordinary happened. They had become more than just survivors, they had become warriors, strategists, engineers, and leaders. They had learned from the planet, adapted to it, and now they were using it against their enemies. In the end, the humans didn't just defeat the aliens, they sent a message across the galaxy. The exiled species, the ones who had been cast aside, had risen to show the universe that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They had survived the deadliest planet, uncovered its secrets, and turned its dangers into their greatest strength. The alien races had feared humanity's potential. They had exiled them, hoping to break them, but instead, they had created something they could never have predicted, a united, unstoppable force. The galaxy would soon learn the truth. Humanity was far more powerful than anyone had ever realized. And as the dust settled, Cain stood tall, his gaze fixed on the stars. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had just begun to show the galaxy what it was capable of. They had fought for their survival, for their future, and they had proven that no one, not even the most advanced alien forces, could stand in their way. The universe had learned its lesson: humanity was not to be underestimated.